It's not perfect. It's the best idea in the 19th century. And it's not quite working in the 20th century. And so I started thinking, what if someone designed digital gold? What if now we go back to the engineer saying, can you perfect gold? And the engineering idea, how do you fix gold and make it perfect? Well, you make it impossible to mine anymore. What if, and then we get into the fantasy thing. What if, if God came down, and there's a bit of theology here, if you allow me, if God came down and wanted to fix gold, it's impossible to make any more gold, right? How can you make it better? It'd be really great if it was weightless. How do you make it better? I'm going to cast a spell and allow you to teleport the gold anywhere on Earth. If God said, I'm going to implement a system of 21 million gold coins, but we're going to call them God coins, and I'm going to keep them in a bank in heaven, and I'm going to let you transfer any amount. I'm going to let you subdivide it by 100 million, and we'll call them Satoshis. And I will let you transfer peer-to-peer and pay anybody, anytime, instantly at the speed of light, and I will keep track of the ledger of who owes
in an incorruptible way.
I will never cheat you, and I will do it forever, for free. If God offered you that kind of divine bank, and you were sitting in Argentina when the currency was collapsing to zero, the Argentine peso went from $1 to the peso to 1,000 pesos to the dollar over 20 years. And it did it 5 times over the century.
Right.
Or if you saw it happen in Russia, where their currency collapsed, the currency collapsed in Brazil, not 25 years ago. Currency collapsed in Germany a few times. If you read the history of civilization, read Durant. Durant's talking about currencies collapsing in Russia in the 16th century.
Yeah.
The Roman emperors.
It's a substantial lifetime risk.
Pretty much, on average, the currency collapses every 30 to 40 years in most political jurisdictions for all of human history. And if you get a currency to last by the way, the best currency of the last 100 years is the dollar. The U.S. won every war of the 20th century. My house in Miami Beach traded for $100,000 in 1930. It would trade for $100 million 100 years later. 99.9% collapse in the value of the dollar. The winning currency of the 20th century, the best currency in the world, lost 99.9% of its value. That's a winner. If you do the math fast, just for the viewers, it works out to 7% a year.
7%.
Inflation over...
In the best currency.
Bitcoin is an ideology that is manifested as a protocol that has materialized as a network across which an asset runs. So,
is the most real aspect of it the ideology?
Let me say, is quantum computing, if it hacks your email account, going to destroy the English language? You see, is quantum computing going to actually break base 10 math? Base 10 math is a protocol. If you have a computer program and it becomes insecure, you have to upgrade the program. But the reason that we use numbers 1 through 9 or 0 through 9 is because over the course of about 900 years, Western civilization realized that we could actually calculate things more efficiently with that protocol. But it's not the only protocol, Jordan. There's base 2. There's base, 16, right? Why do we have 12 months in the year? Why do we have 360 degrees? Because the Babylonians had other systems of math. We have a system of math. There's other languages. Why do we use English? Well, we all decided, the scientists, the economists, Western civilization, there's a lot of reasons why. We could trace it to geography of England and the English Channel and a bunch of stuff. We don't have time for that. It's a protocol. Bitcoin, it's a protocol. What kind of protocol? It's a monetary protocol. Why? What's it informed by? An ideology. What is the ideology? Sovereignty, truth, thermodynamic soundness.
Why thermodynamic soundness?
Because 1 + 1 has to equal 2. And if 1 + 1 equals 3 some days, or 1.5 other days, you can't solve any problem. In engineering, in aeronautical engineering, there's a phrase called an adiabatic system. An adiabatic system means a closed system. And so whenever you're building anything, the problem always starts with assume an adiabatic system.
Right.
If I introduce this heat source, if I fly through, what they're saying is, assuming it's a closed energy system, there's no external factor, right? Assuming an adiabatic system, how long will our podcast go? About 2.5 hours. If Godzilla steps on your studio in the next 30 seconds, the podcast will go shorter because of new energy. So when Godzilla shows up to the playground, all bets are off.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So if I have a bathtub or I have a swimming pool with a leak in it, you can't jump into the swimming pool without risking breaking your neck, right? If I have a leak in a fuselage of an airplane, we can't fly. Explosive decompression. You can, if you're an engineer and you're engineering airplanes or internal combustion engines or spaceships, you have to do the engineering properly, and that includes make it a closed system or a thermodynamically sound system. When it's not, there's leakage, right? There's either a friction cost or there's a leakage cost, and you have to account for the leakage in a replenishment if you want the machine to work. The machine will not work if you don't actually solve the problem. So when we come to this idea of the ideology of Bitcoin, Bitcoin's based upon engineering principles, scientific, mathematical soundness, consistency, integrity, truth, right? And those are all the principles.
And that's the incorruptibility of the ledger.
Those are the principles of libertarians and Austrian economists, right?
Yeah.
And those are also, that is someone that believes that we should be governed by natural law, right? So we go back to John Locke and we go back to natural rights and natural law, right? Nature governs, right? Whether nature gives you gravity. If you tip the glass there, it's falling to the floor. You don't get to break the rule. That is just the rule. You have to comport yourself accordingly, knowing that there's a gravitational field in this room right now. You can't wish it away, right? A lawyer would like to wish it. You'd like to, if the politicians could pass a law, they'd pass a law suspending gravity rights, for the time being in certain places. But you can't, as Elon Musk says, you don't get to break the laws of physics, right? So Bitcoin starts with this ideology of the engineers, the scientists, the mathematicians, right? And we create a protocol. The protocol is, what if a bunch of smart people in the world, what if they wanted to keep their money? What if, or in this case, I gave you the example of the divine bank that God gave you, except if God's not going to set up divine bank and solve all your monetary problem, what's the second best idea? The second best idea would be a smart engineer takes advantage of semiconductors, the internet, and cryptography, and you create a system where 21 million Bitcoins circulate, subdividable by 100 million Satoshis each. That system is protected by public and private key cryptography. And should you actually have possession of the private key, you have control over your coins. That means that you've created a bank in cyberspace. Now imagine 100 rich families. They live all over the world. They all get together one day and they say, well, God won't solve our problems for us, so we got to solve our problems ourselves. Let's go ahead and build out this Bitcoin network. And this is a bank, and we're all going to be able to deposit our money in this bank. Why? We don't trust the government. We don't trust a local bank. We don't trust each other. We don't, and we want the bank to last for 1,000 years. Okay. Who's going to run the software? Well, the answer is everybody's going to run the software because I trust you, you trust me, but your idiot great-grandson I might not trust. Or maybe my idiot great-grandson might not get along with your idiot great-grandson. So, and this is where history of science comes in. You know how we studied longitude? Longitude was the breakthrough that gave the British control of the seas. And the Longitude Prize was instantiated by the Parliament. They offered £10,000 to whoever could figure out how to calculate longitude on the ocean. Every physics professor at Cambridge and Oxford tried it. They all failed. Every mathematician failed. They could not figure it out. A clockmaker by the name of John Harrison makes clocks. He solved the problem. Just like the Wright brothers figured out how to fly without the aeronautical engineering degree, the bicycle makers figured out how to fly. The clockmaker figured out how to solve the problem. He created a perfect clock. It gave you 2 clocks. And when you get in a British ship, you sail past Greenwich, which is where the Royal Observatory is. You set your first clock to Royal Observatory time, Greenwich Mean Time. That's where we got universal time. The second clock is set to local time. The ship sails to the West Indies. You look up, you figure out what high noon is. You compare the second clock to the first clock. You subtract 2 hours. You multiply by 15 degrees. You've got your longitude on the ocean. Now, what's the breakthrough? No one could make a perfect clock. How do I create a perfect clock? Because the metal in the clock expands and contracts. John Harrison created a perfect machine from imperfect materials. What he realized is, yes, the metal does expand and contract. We can't stop it from expanding and contracting with humidity and with temperature. What we can do is take 2 identical pieces of metal and put them in tension with each other. So this one is contracting the same amount that one is contracting. They actually compensate, neutralize each other, and you end up with a perfect machine. That is brilliant engineering, not through math, not through science, but through practical engineering. Harrison creates a perfect clock. The clock inadvertently gives us longitude. Longitude gives the British Navy command of the seas, and we're speaking English right now.
Right.
Got it. Satoshi has to create a perfect monetary network, and you got to create it with imperfect components. The imperfect components are the people, the governments, the actors, the computers. They're going to fail. What happens if the power goes out? What happens if that gets hacked? The answer is, I create a machine that's running the protocol. This one's running the protocol. This one's running the protocol. They're all running at the same time. They're all hashing in order to guess the answer that's required to build the next block. 1 out of 1,000,000 of these things will win. The entire thing is a fault-tolerant, shared nothing, mission-critical, nuclear-hardened system, because what is it? It's a virus, right? It's an internet virus, a monetary virus, an ideological virus, and everyone that chooses to run the node is feeding the network, participating in the network. All of the miners are defending the network. People will, but once you understand it like that, then you realize that what's going on with Bitcoin is a bunch of people with the same ideology. We just all like to keep our money. Running a protocol, have instantiated that protocol